You're listening to the Men After God podcast, the show dedicated to empowering men to navigate life's challenges through the lens of faith. In this episode, we'll tackle real-world issues that matter, from leadership and personal growth to marriage, fatherhood, and balancing career and family. Join us as we explore insightful conversations and practical advice to help you thrive as a man after God's own heart.
Welcome back to the Men After God podcast. I'll be your host today. My name is Luke Sorensen, and we have a special guest. Kevin Elworth is here, and he is a speaker who delights in making the complex simple with his storytelling style. He's a fan of audiences everywhere who leave challenged, encouraged, and motivated in their pursuit of what comes next. His forthcoming book, Breaking the I Can't Cycle, is sure to compel you toward your own determination and drive you to accomplish more. And we are going to have a great episode today just discussing kind of what he's about, and I hope it's encouraging. So if you would take a moment to take some notes down, because I know as a men's ministry leader, as a man after God, he's going to have some value for you today. So that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Kevin. Kevin, tell us a little bit about you and how you got to where you are.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your show today. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm a father, husband, God follower. All those things are my core values, the leader of my list. I have 5 kids. They are, I have 1 biological son and 4 adopted kids. And I think it's always important to just kind of insert the caveat right there. My kids, I don't want my kids to be defined as adopted kids. They're just my kids. I'm an adoptive parent. And so that's the important quantifier in that whole scheme of things. And the way that we became adoptive parents is a story in its own right, not for today. A little bit of my story that I'll integrate into today. But been married for 21 and a half or so years, and we have been all over different facets of ministry. We started out our life in Latin American missions, and did a couple years in Mexico and in Costa Rica, and then I was a pastor for 14 years before the Lord kind of led me out of that. And interesting story in its own right, but literally the Lord told me, "Hey, your time here is done. It's time for you to leave." And that really wrecked my thinking for a long time. It took me 18 months to be able to figure out exactly what he was trying to do with me, until I got to the spot where he literally told me, "Hey, you're going to lose your family or you're going to lose your ministry. You get to choose. If you don't choose anything, you'll lose both." And when I finally got to the spot where I recognized that I had just been kind of issued an ultimatum, I wrote my resignation and I quit my job. And now I'm into business and leadership development, as well as coming alongside of pastors and ministries to help them break through the barriers of where they're at and get to the depth of what they want to experience and accomplish in their ministries and in their lives. So that brings us to today.
Sure. I can appreciate that and respect that so much. Especially I've watched, pastors that I've served with, and I've not been a pastor. I went to college to be in the ministry, and there was just a certain point as I was trying to follow what I believed was my calling that the Lord made it clear that my family was my first ministry at the time. And even though I was very active in church and very involved and still, working a full-time job and working in the ministry, there's a huge amount of respect I have for you to be able to look and see, hey, God has given us the ministry of our family, and there is a priority that our, we have this, we grew up in a culture where it was like, God, church, family, and that's not the way that it's supposed to be. If God is first, family will always come second when it comes to your priorities. And so, I have a lot of respect for that, and I know that I've seen a lot of what you're doing online with a lot of great pastors who are trying to balance the family and the ministry and the calling of God and what they're passionate about, and also what they have to pay bills and be there for their spouse, all that. And so I think there's a lot that you have to offer when it comes to walking people through that in a way where they can feel encouraged and not defeated in the process. I know part 100%. Of that, there's a lot of obstacles, and so I guess my question for you now would be, what has been your experience with overcoming just obstacles in general? So walk us through that.
Wow. So here's how this played out for me. I am currently 43 years old. It took me 40 years to recognize that I was living my life based on fear. I had no idea. I had no idea that this was part of my context. In fact, it was kind of the number one thing I preached about was, we're supposed to be fearless. And I was on this war path towards abolishing fear out of my context. In the midst of all this, I had hired a coach to kind of work with me. I'd never done that before. I'd never been a part of any of that process. And as a result of these conversations that she and I were having, now mind you, she was 1,000 miles away from me. I've never met this person in my life. She's about 75 years old. Greatest ministry help I've ever had in my life. And ironically, she's from Frisco, Texas, so right close to where you're at today.
Real close to where I'm at, yeah.
Yeah, seriously. But she makes this statement to me in one of the conversations that we had. She had kind of, through questioning, proper coaching is just asking the right questions. And she asked me this question and makes this statement. And she says, Kevin, you are worshiping fear. You have made fear an idol. And you are worshiping at the altar of fear. And I'll be honest with you, I was like speechless. I had no idea how to recover from that. What do you do with a statement like that? And, I fumbled around for a minute trying to gain my composure in this Zoom call that we were having together. And in my kind of debrief session that I had with myself after this conversation, I recognized the fact that she's 100% right. I had been worshiping at an altar of fear. What does it look like to worship fear? It looks like that you cater to every fear in your life. You bow down to it. In other words, you make it happy. Because if you don't make fear happy, it's out to get you. Now, that was the lie I was believing. And these things are so subtle. The deceiver is so subtle in your life. You may not even recognize the fact that you're cozying right up to this enemy of yours. And that's what I was doing in my life. And once I recognized that, I went on a war path to abolish fear from my own life. How does that look? What does it look like to abolish fear from your life? I am a huge fan in the idea of like repetitious patterns. You really, really accomplish a lot in your life when you take the guesswork out of anything. If you can follow a pattern and just repeat that over and over and over again, you can gain a lot of ground, a lot of headway. And so what did I do? I put together a war plan, and my war plan was a prayer process. Every day I would get up and I would actually read through the exact same prayer every day. Because now here, prayer is for two things. I think we all know this. Prayer is communication between you and God. But prayer is also you altering your thinking. That's what Romans 12:2 is all about. And this was a renewal of my mind. And I was going through a mind-renewing process, and the way to go through that is take the guesswork out of the equation. I didn't have to come up with a new prayer every day. I just had to know what to pray. And so in a healthy moment, I sat down and I wrote a prayer that I began to just pray over my own mind, over my life, over myself. And it was, I acknowledge that fear is dead in my life today. It has no place among me, has nothing to do with me. I'd quote that scripture, Romans 12:2, over my life, and I would go about my day. And slowly, subtly, over time, I recognized the fact that, fear has less and less control over my thinking. In other words, I'm no longer bowing down to this idol of fear.
Right. I love that. Before we jump into the next question here, because I think there's some stuff you said, there's a lot you just said. So first of all, it's a beautiful testimony. And I do believe that you're talking to an audience that has probably perked their ears saying, oh, he's talking to me. I've been there. I know that I'm here. I have no idea what you're going to talk about today. And immediately I'm like, wow, he's talking to me, because Luke Sorensen has dealt with this for most of my life. And I'm 35 years old, and I've spent 35 years fighting that same mindset, and I'm still fighting it. And I love the fact you're like, hey, 40 out of 43 years, I battled this. But you said something that struck a note. You said, in a healthy moment, you wrote down a prayer, and I do think it's crucial. A lot of us will write down a prayer while we're in a place of maybe lament, and those are good prayers, right? But they're not the prayers that are going to change that thought process, because Romans 12:1-2 are my life verse. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service, and be not transformed. In the changing of your mind, like the renewed mind is crucial. But can you just talk to just for just a moment on that in the healthy moment? Like, why do we need to do this in a healthy? And again, I know it's hard for some people. I mean, you don't understand the pressure I'm under, but why is it crucial to write down that confident prayer when you're confident? Does that make sense?
100% it does. Here's the problem. Okay, the problem or the pain point that you feel is that we only get so many healthy moments. And in my healthy moment, I got to be on my A game, and I've got to be advancing, because I feel like so many things are advancing against me all the other times. The best thing you can do in that healthy moment is remember the fact that the fight is still happening. And there's still something coming at you on any given moment, any given day, where you're going to feel attacked, where you're going to feel defeated, where you're going to feel overwhelmed again. So what do? The best time to plan for a fight is not when you're being fought. It's when you're resting, when you're re-strategizing.
That's good.
And so for me, the moment became like, okay, I've got some self-discipline. Let's activate the fruit of the Spirit here, my self-control. My self-control moment said, I got to sit down and plan for the next attack, or strategize for how I'm going to whip this. Because I already know from the scripture that it has no power over me, but I'm giving it power. And so how do I reclaim that? And we reclaim it through prayer. And we think that, sometimes we think that these Hail Mary prayers, the prayers that happen in the desperation of the moment, are enough. And they're not enough. That's not mind renewal. Mind renewal is coming back saying, okay, this is working. This is working. I don't feel like it's working. And I don't feel any different than it did yesterday. But I know by faith it's working.
That's great. Hey, I really love that. Let's jump into this next question. What is one thing that people should know about how to confront this in their lives? Like, what's the one takeaway? Like, hey, where do you start? What's the one thing?
I think it's that. Get real and get very honest and transparent with yourself. You've got to analyze. I always ask people all the time, when I meet with my coaching clients, I'll text them periodically and I'll be like, all right, hey, pulse check. What's the status today? Get vulnerable with me for a minute, and trust me. Ironically, and I'll answer this in two parts, but I always tell my coaching clients, listen, I want you to tell me before your spouse, right? And I had this happen the other day. I was so proud of the guy. Inevitably, I don't care what kind of leader you're in, what kind of leadership position you're in, there's always some kind of fear-filled trouble. And I'll never forget the first time this happened to me. One of my first clients, he had bought my coaching package, ready, he committed to it, and then he lost a six-figure deal. Oh, wow. And he's freaking out, and he was like, he had to convince himself to still hire me. And he said this, he said, I went home and I told my wife. And I was like, dude, that's the last thing you should do, because your wife's going to bear that. I mean, here's the thing. You're going to transfer that stress to her, and you're going to go to bed at night and be like, oh man, I don't know how it's going to work out, but it's going to work out fine. She's going to go to bed being like, we're going to lose everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I told her, I was like, listen, here's the thing. I said, you tell me first and let me help you break the ice off of that barrier. And I'll help you frame, what do you tell your wife? But she should not be the person to carry that strain and that stress with you. So you've got to get vulnerable with yourself and acknowledge the fact of what you're up against. You are up against something. What is it? Is it fear? Is it a frustration? Is it overwhelm? Is it burnout, defeat? Is it confidence? What is it? What are you up against that you need to get very real and transparent with yourself? I mean, this can be this can be Psalm 139, 23 and 24. Search me, O God, know my heart, know my thoughts, know my anxious thoughts, right? And I got a whole content about this. I think I did a podcast about this a couple months back about the idea of we're misinterpreting Psalm 139, 23 and 24. We need a new frame on that. But get real and vulnerable and honest and ask God, what is wrong in my thinking that needs to be corrected? and then start putting a battle plan together. That really should be what this is.
Yeah, really, really encouraged by that. I think that, we do that, and I want to just touch on what he says. He's not telling you to not tell your wife things. He's not saying that there is a right way to be able to unburden yourself without burdening someone who really is not designed to carry some of the load that you're carrying. And I want to make sure to be encouraged, like, hey, we're not saying don't be honest with your wife. We're saying, hey, there's a right way to transfer what you're carrying as a leader, as a provider. And I just want to make sure that and by the way, what Kevin is saying is he's encouraging to be vulnerable with yourself and to know yourself, to be self-aware, but also I want to encourage what he's talking about. Like he does coaching, and I believe that any leader that is worth their salt will always encourage everyone to have a coach and have a mentor. Like you need I don't think there's anybody I know in my life or in my past life that doesn't need to have a coach who can help them navigate some of these scenarios, which, hey, I just lost a huge amount of our income, and that's burdening me. And immediately I want to, for some people, most humans, they process things inside or outside, right? Some people, they want to take it in and just kind of stifle it. And I'm not saying that's the right way. Also, then some people want to talk about it to everybody in their circles, and that's not the right way either. No, but when you have a coach and you have someone who they can use them as a feedback board, as a sounding board, and they're on the outside, they can help you. Like they can give you a different perspective. They can give you a different reality. Also, they can help you with the communication between what needs to be delivered to your spouse or to your kids. Like there's certain things that we go through different things, and like my kids aren't qualified to carry some of what I carry. They're just not. And yet, if you're not careful, you'll unburden on them just because you're not able to restrain yourself. So great stuff there. Really appreciate that. I want to ask you this. There's a phrase that people should no longer say if they want to experience breakthroughs in this. And what is that phrase? So this is a huge breakthrough. What's the phrase?
It's 2 words. I can't.
Oh, man. Shambles.
Yeah. And so here's how I do this. I actually, I've written a whole book on this. My book is called, we introduced it, but Breaking the I Can't Cycle. I recognized, like right to the end of my pastoral tenure, I recognized that this is who I had become. My whole life was filled with I can'ts. And honestly, I was constantly looking for reasons to say no. With every offer, I lived with such a skeptic, fear-filled scarcity mentality that I felt like everything was out to extract from me. I felt like everyone wanted to just take from me instead of offer me something. One of my new favorite verses is I got this written right here. Proverbs 11, 26. The people curse him who hold back grain, but a blessing is on the head of him who sells it, not gives it, sells it. Think about that. There's an importance of transaction that takes place. This is, and honestly, pastor, person, whoever you are, you need to understand that the value of transaction is healthy. It's not what you get for free that's healthy. It's what you're willing to pay for. And life change didn't happen for me until I entrusted the fact that I needed to hire someone to help me get out of it. And then the world changed for me. Then the Word of God activated for me in a way that I didn't even know. And I'd already been a pastor for 12 years at that point. We get this spot. In fact, I was coaching with a guy yesterday from Baltimore. And he said this, he says, I'm getting ready to graduate cemetery, whatever you want to call it. And he's like, I don't feel equipped. I don't feel equipped to go out and do this. And I said, it's because of the fact that all you're getting is information. You're not getting the benefit of conversation that helps you coach beyond the places that you're at. Why? Because we use the phrase, I can't. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to make a sweeping assumption here, but I think you're going to agree with me. We can all understand the truthfulness of the Word of God. Mm-hmm. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
I don't think we are going to deny that. All right. So Paul wrote pretty phenomenal verse. Maybe some of you have this tattooed somewhere. Philippians 4:13, right? I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Now, here's the thing. This was the last sermon I preached on stage before I was done. And because it was just such a breakthrough moment for me. But if Paul's words are true, and if we can claim those as our own, then the phrase, I can't, followed by any other words, is the most atheistic thing that you could ever declare over your life. And I want to bring that full circle because I don't think we understand the implications of how powerful this is. Like, for example, one of my favorite phrases that I hear people say right now, I can't afford that. What you are saying is that it's not about what I have in my possession today. It's that I can never allow that to come into my life now or in the future. Because when you say, I can't afford that, you are literally declaring over your future, I won't think it, I won't ask questions about it, I won't look in the direction of it, I won't. And then you're saying this, not even God can do this for me. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to extinguish the very power of God from your existence based on those simple words? I mean, that brings up a whole nother slew of questions. What do you do when you can't, right? So when you just can't even. Yeah, seriously, come on. And so let me frame it like this. My wife grew up here in South Central PA, loves seafood, has loved seafood her whole life, loves crab, shrimp, seafood boils. She loves all these things. And we've had so many good experiences with that. I hate seafood. I can't stand it. She loves it. And so I'll tolerate it from time to time because she does. Now, this was all fine, well, and good. And so we just lived life like normal. And on our 16th wedding anniversary, she's like, hey, can we get some shrimp? Yeah, let's do shrimp, man. So we go get shrimp, grill up the shrimp, and enjoy a great dinner. An hour afterwards, she's in full anaphylactic shock. And we got to call an ambulance. And this is 2 weeks after we've just brought home our youngest daughter from Florida, where we adopted her. And so she's like strung out on the floor, ballooned up like crazy, thinking that she's going to die, watching me stand over her with our brand new little girl. And I mean, she is dying. I call an ambulance. They're there, and they go into mode, and sure enough, she's developed a shellfish allergy that's going to kill her. So my question: can she eat seafood? Yes, she can. Yes, she can. Should she? Probably not. No. And so here's the new analysis. It's not about can or can't. It's, is this right for my situation today? It's not about can I afford this? Is this the wisest thing for us to do with the resources that we do or do not have? This is looking at things from a new perspective. That's what this is.
That's powerful. I think, I've been in this cycle before where it's just been, it's not in the budget, or we can't afford it, or that's not of God because He hasn't provided it already. And sometimes our mindset is so limiting that it's not about whether God can or cannot provide it. My father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. I've got $20 and all the promises of God. But it does come down to that mindset shift of is this right? Is it best? And is it glorifying to God? Is it, there is this, and we a lot of times will limit ourselves in the culture that we grew up with, that if you live in a wealthy manner, if you're not living like a pauper, then you're not living godly, and that is not biblical. And it's a toxic belief system. And I work for a company, and the owner is a very generous individual, and I get to be a part of his generosity has flowed down to me. And when I first started with the company, I was a broke college student, pretty much, first just married and really had nothing. And after a while, he understands the philosophy of Christianity and stuff, and I believe he's saved at this point. But he asked me, he's like, "Luke, you do know that if you never make more money, and we have like an unlimited income type opportunity in the job that I work, he's like, if you never strive to make more money, you're never going to be able to make an impact with money." And I was like, what?
Oh.
And he's like, if you don't try to become wealthy, you will never be able to impact people in an area where you can be almost the most impactful. He said, I'm all about your spiritual side and helping people with their mental health and their peace and getting to know God. He's like, I'm all about that. That is great. But did you know you can do that more effectively if you're wealthy? And it was just this whole like, wait. And he's like, look what I can do. I can write a check to whoever I want for however much I want and can change their world because I'm wealthy. Because I strove to take care of and be a good steward of what I was given so that I can in turn give that back. And going back to what you said, obviously there's this culture shift of, the lies, the story that we tell ourselves becomes the truth that we live, but that isn't the truth that's in the Bible. It's just the truth that we've adopted as, well, this is our truth. And that's not how truth works. So
not true.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Talk to that if you would.
Yeah, let me flirt with that, because now you're opening up my favorite can of worms that I love to just poke my fingers into in the church world. But I'll start it by saying this, and no one is going to deny the conversation that is all over the church world when it comes to the prosperity gospel, right? I mean, we hear that phrase all the time. How come no one talks about the poverty gospel?
Whoa, that's good. Let's park there for a minute. Wow. I've never heard, I will say this. I've heard about the prosperity gospel because we'll speak against different high level figures in different big churches that are obviously, I mean, you know who I could say their names, and I'm not saying they rhyme with Joe Osteen, but they might. But we've talked about the prosperity, but I've never heard the phrase, the poverty. I've never heard that phrase, but immediately you said that, I'm like, man, I've been there. I've preached that.
Yep. We have. Why? Why is that? It's because the fact that so many people kind of live in that zone that we think that poverty equals spirituality. And it doesn't. It doesn't. You can have the same love of problem being dirt poor as you can the love of problem being a billionaire.
Yep.
It's not about the quantity. It's not about the zeros in the bank. It's about the love problem. And obviously I'm talking about that verse from Timothy that says the love of money is the root of all evil.
Right.
And so let's quantify what's the condition of our heart. And so please do not glamorize or over spiritualize the fact that you don't have enough. That is not a good place for you to be.
Right.
In fact, it should be your number one quest to figure out, how do I get abundant? Because let's believe the gospel, the fullness of it. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And everywhere you go in the world, the Lord is showing you signs that this is an abundant land. I mean, for the fact that we can dig in the ground and find buried treasure, why on earth would we believe that there's a scarcity in our culture today?
Right.
Anywhere you go. In fact, a new venture that my wife and I have just started, we just founded a nonprofit organization called Sparrow Village Initiatives, because it answers one of the heart cries that we have towards bringing, life transformation to, third world developing countries.
Yeah,
and
sure.
we found this thing in Uganda. I mean, it's the Lord just kind of put it right in front of my face, and I recognized it. And I'm watching this guy, his name is Sam, and he has taken in 120 orphans himself.
Wow.
And so I'm trying to do everything I can to be able to verify that this is an actual thing. This isn't just a money grab opportunity. So I'm actually out of my own pocket. I'm flying over there in January to be able to go visit this guy and verify that this is real. Now, I've talked to 10 different people that have verified that this is right and it's real. But my thing is just like, I asked even a question of a guy once, and I said, why is it that life can be abundant for us here, but not for them there? And he said, you're looking at it from the wrong perspective. He said, first of all, there's a lot of compromise, or what's it called, corruption inside of the African culture. And I was like, okay, point taken. But he said this. He said, the laws that work for you are the laws that work for them too. He said this, and this blew my mind. Has he asked properly? Because the biblical precedent is there. Ask and you will receive. Mm-hmm. And it really struck me. I was like, you know what? If all we ever do is complain about what we don't have, but we're not asking questions in the right direction, it's no wonder why we don't have what we want.
Right. Yeah. We could probably spend another 5 or 6 podcasts on this subject. For the sake of time, we won't, but I do want to, and I know that we're going to do, we'll have Dustin do a partner podcast with Kevin's podcast as well. But the mindset shift is one, and I know we're talking to potentially pastors that are, doing very well, and pastors that are wishing they had an income from the church and they're working 3 jobs to pay bills. And we're talking to men that don't have a job right now because they've lost their job. We're talking to businessmen that are very, very successful and very, very, they've stewarded what God's given them very well. So we're talking to a lot of audience here, but the thought process is the understanding that, Jesus came to give us life and that more abundant. And that word abundant does not imply lack. It doesn't imply less. And so the philosophy of thought process, I love that. Are we asking correctly? Are we asking at all? Or are we asking amiss to consume it upon our own lust because it's all about us? Because if we can look and say, hey, there's a bigger story. What is God trying to do in our life to show himself strong in our life? And I believe that the turnoff to the world, to what sometimes the way that we present the gospel is, well, if I become a Christian, I have to give up everything in my life to be a Christian. And that's not what Jesus called you to do. He asked you to pick up your cross and follow him. And that might look differently, but how much more glory can we give to God where we can say, well, God has provided and we lack nothing, but there is an abundant life. And it's a mindset of gratitude. I'm grateful for what I have, and I'm able to reach and strive for more. And I think that, we go back to even your podcast name, Thriving Pastors, right? What a misnomer that we have. Like, so many people are like, okay, well, I'm just a pastor. No. Where's the thriving? Because Jesus didn't make you a pastor to make you miserable. And if you're a miserable pastor, you probably shouldn't be a pastor. I don't want you to. Something's not right here. And a lot of it is primarily your perception of what God wants to do in and through your life. And so it looks like Kevin's got something here. I want to hear what he's got here.
I do. Let me give you the tagline for my podcast too, because I quantified it, but it's called Pastors Thriving: Strategies for Lead Pastors Toward Growth in Money and Ministry. Because what I want to do is I want to help you conceptualize the idea of where does my money come from? And I want to sell it like this, because you're exactly right, Luke. There is a lot of people out there that are on the quest to finally just get paid from your church. If I can finally just get a salary and not have to worry about anything else, I think you're asking the wrong question, bro. I don't think you should be asking that question. I think you should be asking, God, where do you want my money to come from so that I can serve the church?
Sure. That's good.
Oh my gosh. It would infinitely, here's the thing. When the Lord came to me and said, Kevin, your time here is done. I need you to get out of the way, resign your position. I could do that because of the fact that I had 3 streams of income coming from somewhere else. And when I was giving up my paycheck, I wasn't giving up my whole paycheck. Now, did it put a financial pressure on us? Heck yeah, it did. And especially for the fact that we had just built a $500,000 house. And I'm like, hey, God, who's going to pay for this now?
Right.
But I had to trust him in that. And then here's the thing. I don't know if I'm in the right place for this, but in the Gospels, y'all are familiar, I'm sure, with where he called James and John to follow him, right? Mm-hmm. And he's calling all these disciples at the same time. And he specifically says to James and John, hey, come follow me. And it said that they said this. It says that they left their nets in the hands of the hired servants and they went to follow him.
This is good. This is good. I love where you're going with this.
Dude, here's the thing. And my question for you, how come the hired servants didn't get to follow too? Was that call exclusive to James and John? Because I don't think it was. I think they were the ones who said, sure, let's go. And why? Well, why were they free to follow, but not the hired servants?
I think there's 2 answers here that are and they're both aligned. First of all, even Jesus says, if any man will deny himself and pick up his cross and follow me, like it's an any man thing. So the calling is to any individual who's willing to say, I will follow Jesus. But The answer to that is the reason that James and John could is because they financially, like the reason that the servant couldn't was because they had to pay the bills versus James and John potentially had established themselves in a way where somebody else could work the boats and make the money, and they were free to, they didn't have the burden of, I got to pay the electric bill and the internet bill and somehow, some way. Now, does that mean that, you can't follow God and if you don't have an income outside? No, it's just saying that there's a priority of God has already provided, but oftentimes we're ignoring the provision because we're so convinced that the provision is for us to be paupers and to be, whatever that looks like. And that's not the picture that God has given us. And I'm not saying it's not for some because everyone's different, but this is good stuff right here.
It really came down to the fact that James and John had answered a question that I'm not sure they even intentionally asked, but they had a small business coming in. They had a small business created. I'll be honest with you, if I had to go do it over again, I would have not chosen to go to the mission field at 25 years old. I would have decided to start a business and make my life really profitable so that I could go there and not wonder, am I going to make money? Am I going to be able to survive? Because that's all I was focused on was how are we going to make it through another month? How are we going to be able to do this? And we thought this is how it's supposed to work. It didn't work, bro. It didn't work. Yeah. You use your God-given intellect to figure out how do I get some cash in my pocket, get free of the debt cycle that can, or learn a proper approach to a debt cycle that can actually pay you instead of take from you, and then go from there.
Yeah, let me ask you this. I think that because we're talking, some people are already they're like, wow, this podcast went way south to my thinking. Like, this is not like who did Dustin put in charge today, right? For those persons that are, and I want to say this, I grew up in a family where we were taught to live by faith, and we learned the missionary stories, and I do believe, I want to make sure it's real clear, God can and will provide. God is Jehovah Jireh. There's an aspect of living by faith, and there are many times that God will allow you to live by faith. But I want to make sure it's real clear. A lot of people think that living by faith is I have to be poor so God will pay for my bills, and that's not living by faith. That's living by foolishness. There is an aspect of what God. But sometimes, even in a wealthy or a financially rich environment, I say sometimes, God will always challenge any individual that is following him to live by faith. So sometimes it's financial. A lot of times it's other ways that God is going to challenge you to live by faith. Kevin, can you talk to that person who's like, wait, I want to live by faith, and I feel like if I've got all these streams of income or I'm financially set, that I won't be able to live by faith. Like, that's not living by faith. Can you talk to that just to correct that thought process and make it make sense to that person?
So first, let me give you this. Let me punch a little harder than what you just said. There's a difference between faith and stupidity.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, God gave you an intellect. Use it. Expand it. If you feel limited in your intellect or in your income, then think a little harder. My thesis on life right now is your future is defined by the questions you're willing to answer, not ask. You can ask all questions all day long, but you've got to be willing to answer the questions. And to be honest with you, you don't know what questions to ask. And that's why coaching is such a very valuable part of your life, because they're going to ask you a question that you never thought to ask. And then they're going to force you to answer it, right? Mm-hmm. But for the one who feels like I can't trust God in this setting, my goodness, yes, you can. How can you not? Because our quest in life should be to use what God has given to us in our hand, no matter what it is, to be able to impact and infiltrate a world around us, even if it's just your own family. I mean, let's face it. What good does it do if you can't feed your own family? It does no good at all. And so let's figure that one out, and then let's use these abundant resources that are never going to stop flowing in your direction to be able to impact and influence a world that really desperately needs it. I mean, let's be honest. I heard a phenomenal statement. I got to go to Guatemala back in 2015 and visit the ministry compound, I guess you could call it, of Carlos Vargas. He runs Hope of Life International, and Carlos is one of the most faith-filled people I have ever experienced in my life. I mean, every word he says just drips with, I'm just expecting God to show up. And he said this, he made this statement. He said, I don't care what gospel you preach, if you haven't met their practical need of the pain of hunger in their stomach, they don't care what your God did.
That's good.
Oh my God, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to think.
It's a wake up. It's a wake up.
Seriously. And we can affect that need, you know? Like, here's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't have, in this setting that I have right now, I don't have enough. I don't have what I need to be able to affect these 120 orphans that I found in Africa. I don't have it. But I know my God does, and I know that the answer to the question is just me pressing harder on it and saying, okay, I can't change this guy's world, but I can ask questions in the direction of and get him connected to a flow of people who can.
That's good.
That's my part of it.
I think we oftentimes, and if for any of you who've listened to the podcast, you've heard me say this probably a dozen times now. Don't let what you can't do keep you from doing what you should or can do. And I believe the whole "I can't" philosophy, because sometimes it's not what I can and can't do; it's what am I supposed to do? What is right? What is best? Right. And so, looking at this, I believe that it comes down to a stewardship conversation. For the sake of time, I want to kind of wrap it up, because I know we're going to have more conversations with Kevin, but I really want to hone in on this because Kevin's mindset is, in a lot of what he does, is helping people steward their gifts that God has given, not just the calling, but the gifts that God has given you as a pastor, as a leader, as someone who is capable of more and just needs the understanding that it's there. And so I want to talk to this. Your signature message really talks about, people focusing on people's ability versus inability. Can you talk to that and then kind of bring us home to a conclusion of, hey,
100%,
facing the fear and really owning the fact that we need to step out by faith in a different philosophy of how we're thinking about it.
Yeah, 100%. I'll use some of my wife's words. My wife, Crystal, has the most can-do mentality I've ever seen in my life. Her phrase always is this: don't tell me how you can't, tell me one way that you can. And it's just that acknowledgement of determination. All right, let's take one step forward. I wish I didn't get to get into my signature message today, but it's literally how our baby girl that we adopted through a private adoption scenario, it's how she came into our existence and how it's wrecked with my can't do mentality. And she wouldn't be here today. She would not be here today if I would not have been able to overcome that mentality. And that becomes the thing. Is I would end it with this line: whose life doesn't change because you said I can't? Because you declared impossibility over your life. Whose life is still miserable and unaffected and is not infiltrated with the goodness and the hope of the gospel because you said, I can't do that. I can't go there. I can't imagine that. I can't afford that. You just declared it over someone else. We have to understand that there is a generational effect that happens because of our indecision. You see, we think sometimes that we are protecting ourselves because we chose not to. And you may be protecting yourself from whatever, but you actually may be committing a death sentence to someone else. You've got to understand that the power of God wants to flow through you and change you and bring life to you. That's why he said Paul wrote Ephesians 3:20. And we've got to be able to allow that expediency and abundancy and above all we can ask, think, or imagine. You're limiting that by an I can't do mentality.
Yeah,
we got to stop it. And
we've heard the phrase, somebody's waiting, or somebody is on the other side of our obedience. Who's waiting on the other side? I think the concept is who's waiting on the other side of our abundant mindset. Who again, that concept of whose life is not changed because of your I can't do mentality. So
Luke,
good.
I'll share it with you like this, since we share this John Maxwell affinity. The first time I heard John speak live was at the International Maxwell Conference back in 2023. And he said this. He said, success is found on the other side of yes. Mic drop moment, man. I was speechless.
Yes, good.
That's so powerful. Let me end it with this, because I got a program that I am putting together for churches, pastors right now. The biggest need that I am seeing in church, I've interviewed so many pastors from around the world. In fact, I have an interview with a guy in Africa today, and he's going to tell me the exact same thing. I know it. The global problem in church today is indifference, apathy. I just don't care. People don't care anymore. And so here's the thing. I'm putting together a quick, it'll be a 1-week course to lead pastors, churches. Maybe you're not even a church, to go through. And I'm calling it the Make More Disciples Challenge. I want to help churches ignite the hearts of their apathetic people and find a new opportunity toward impact and resiliency. And I think this is the way to do it. So stay tuned to watch for that. I'll be promoting it in December, and we'll launch with it in January.
Yeah, exciting times. Love that. Obviously, we love what Kevin is doing, and we've been watching and kind of partnering with. And Kevin is actually one of Dustin's coaches, and has been a part of Dustin's growth as well. So, highly encourage you to check out more of his stuff, and with his book, the Breaking the I Can't Cycle. Looking forward to that. That'll be exciting. So, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Kevin, for your time, for your value. I know that we're gonna have more. What a faith conversation! I believe that this is it's encouraged me. I hope it's been encouragement to you. That being said, we will see you next time on our next podcast here in the next couple of days here. So you have a great day. Kevin, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Men After God podcast. We hope today's discussion has encouraged and equipped you on your journey. We'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, comments, or would like to partner with us, please reach out at support@menaftergod.net. Stay connected with our community by liking our Facebook page at facebook.com/menaftergodpodcast. For deeper engagement, join our group at facebook.com/groups/menaftergod and connect with other men pursuing God's heart. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more men striving to live faithfully. Until next time, stay strong in the faith and continue pursuing after God.